ladies and gentlemen, today we have Paul Jones from Department of Agriculture and Fisheries and Emerald joining us, who'll guide you through today's topic of spelling strategies for recovery of pasture condition. Paul has had a 28-year research and development career with the Queensland Government, working in the southwest, central and northern Queensland areas. He has done research and development work on woody weed management, rangeland monitoring, native pasture grazing trials, long-term carrying capacity and wet season spelling. So, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Paul along. And Paul, it's over to you.
Yes, thanks Greg, and good morning everyone. Here I was on talk today about spelling strategies and recovery of pasture condition, a project that's we've just finished and hoping to continue it. First thing I'd just like to acknowledge a number of people that gave me great guidance, especially the technical panel, Richard Silcock, David Orr, David Reid, Bob Mayer, Sean McIver and Mick Quirk, and Joe Scanlon, Peter Reagan, Bob Carson, Cameron Allen. Our cooperators on property, especially the Linses at Wombiana and the Burnett's at Monteagle, as well as Richard Hawkins and John Dunn that helped us with some case studies. And the technical officers who worked at different times, Carly Poulter, Jane Tinkle and Carly Harrison, and DAF and MLA for funding this project. But today what I want to go through is a summary of what we found, a bit of background in there as to what we knew already and what we knew we didn't know, and then some of the details of what we did and what we found, and some of the modelling outcomes from this as well, and then put that into some general grazing land management recommendations. In summary, spelling has only given a small improvement in the crown cover and seedling survival of desert bluegrass, the crown cover being the living material at ground level of perennial grasses. So it's a really good measure of the health and vigour of the pasture, and particularly the size of the root system. So the land condition and pasture composition haven't changed yet as a result of that spelling, so productivity hasn't increased with spelling so far. And the moderate or high stocking rate also hasn't given an overall change either. Spelling under moderate or high stocking rate hasn't had a great impact on the change in land condition. One of the problems we've found with the seedling establishment of 3P grasses, particularly our desert blue, 3P being the perennial productive palatable grasses. It happens episodically, not very often. It didn't happen much we didn't have a big seedling recruitment in this research, and that's definitely necessary to improve land condition and productivity. The beauty of modelling is we can take this information to other land types and other climatic zones, and this is not the only work going on here. We added some detail to the other work that's coming out of the Wombiana grazing trial and the modelling crew. The importance of spelling during the growing season. Appropriate stocking rates are essential. The benefits may not show if stocking rates and grazing pressure is too high. The poorer the land condition, more frequent spells and good growing conditions are going to be needed to improve land condition. So some general recommendations in that: stocking around long-term carrying capacity, varying stocking rates in a risk-averse manner, so being aggressive in reducing stocking rates with poor seasonal conditions, and being conservative when increasing stocking rates with improving seasonal conditions. A wet season spell for the health and vigour and improve the land condition, and also part of the way to address patch grazing. Patch grazing can be partially managed through fencing, water distribution, supplements, and sometimes patch burning. Complex multi-paddock grazing systems don't appear to be the answer, but applying the above principles will generally achieve acceptable economic and environmental outcomes. Okay, so a bit of the background. The importance of this project was looking at sea condition land. You've probably seen this land condition framework, the A condition being a good density of desert blue there, and no signs of rilling or erosion, and that native pasture is producing to its productive potential. That D condition on the bottom right has probably lost 20 centimetres or more of topsoil. Very questionable whether it can ever be rehabilitated, and a large amount of time and money would be needed in that. What we're looking at is the C condition, and this is where our sights were focused, because it is a significant concern across northern Australia, particularly in the beef research committees. As you can see there is a density of perennial grasses. A lot of those are wire grasses in that C condition photo there. There's fairly big gaps between those crowns of those grasses. There is some desert blue there, so there is potential for improvement of that C condition. So that's the areas we were targeting, and it's probably lost 50% of its productive potential, but the density of 3Ps is still there, and potential to improve the productivity of that. So the research is looking at those C condition sites. You've probably seen this as well, but it's a very good visual demonstration of what goes wrong with high stocking rates during the growing season. The plant on the left is both plants are black speargrass. The plant on the left was clipped down to 5 centimetres every 6 weeks, whereas the plant on the right was clipped every 2 weeks. And while we didn't know a lot about spelling and the processes there, this is the reverse, I guess, in that this is what happens if we don't spell and have too high a grazing pressure, that the health and vigour and the size of the root system of perennial grasses can really suffer. There's a lot of information around this. The EcoGraze project looked at exactly these processes. This is a grazing trial located on 3 properties near Charters Towers, and they looked at wet season spelling and also an increased stocking rate with wet season spelling, and found that with an early wet season spell of 8 weeks, you could effectively double the stocking rate and still maintain land condition and productivity. And this went on to the Wombiana grazing trial. The EcoGraze project only had small plots of 1 to 5 hectares, whereas the Wombiana grazing trial had 100 hectare plots with 3 land types in them. So, and one of the treatments within the Wombiana grazing trial was looking at those EcoGraze recommendations, and it wasn't able to be sustained at a paddock level. And as soon as that trial, I'll just go back into that one of those treatments was looking at a 3 paddock rotation, where one of those paddocks out of the 3 was spelled every year, and the other paddocks loaded up. And that went all right for 4 or 5 years until they came into a fire and some dry conditions, and that meant a lot of increased grazing pressure on the adjoining paddocks, and they had to take that back to long-term carrying capacity to sustain that. So it didn't replicate the EcoGraze projects, and it showed the problems with the loading up of other paddocks when a paddock's being spelled. Around the same time, Trevor Hall's grazing systems research looked at a property level of different grazing systems. I'll roughly call them cell, rotational and continuous grazing, indicating a difference in the intensity of management on those systems. And this was conducted on 9 properties stretching from Richmond in the north to Surat in southern Queensland. And overall there was very little difference with grazing systems and the pastures we were measuring and the stocking rates being run on those pastures. The seasonal conditions improved over the 4 years of that project, and all those different systems improved in land condition regardless of the grazing system. And the stocking rates there was no significant difference in the stocking rates being run across those systems. One criticism we had on that research was what we missed in that was the human aspect, that the managers of those properties, and they're very good managers, most of them had several properties and been there for 3 or 4 generations. But the comment we had was that the managers of those properties had become better managers of their grazing land regardless of which grazing system they were using. Northern Grazing Systems Project ran some extensive consultations right across northern Australia, both with technical experts as well as industry, and a common theme out of that was we didn't have a lot of knowledge on the processes involved with the benefits of wet season spelling, and industry echoed that as well. So this is what led to this project going ahead. So we're trying to, the project was aimed to try and get a better understanding of the processes involved in wet season spelling, and answer some specific questions such as what's the impact of timing, duration and frequency of wet season spelling. So timing being pardon me, which years or which seasonal conditions, the duration, the early wet season spell versus a full wet season spell, and the frequency. Do we need to spell every year or every third year, or just individual years when there's been some good seasonal conditions? And we're feeding this information to Joe Scanlon, leading the modelling team, to inform GRASP. GRASP is a pasture growth model, and this was contributing to the improvement of grass and better simulating pasture recovery and those processes happening over the wet season when perennial grasses are growing there. That's Richard Silcock on the right there, demonstrating a good bending of the knees and keeping his back straight while sampling. Sorry, where am I? These are the actual sites within the project. The Wombiana site near Charters Towers within the Wombiana grazing trial. The Monteagle site is just northwest of Claremont, and the Oaklands was a demonstration site, which is just near Baralabar. I'll mainly talk about the Wombiana and Monteagle sites as they were the detailed sites within this study. This is a picture of the Monteagle site. As you can see, there's some good desert blue there. There's a lot of wiregrass and a lot of bare areas, and that was during some good seasonal conditions. So we're fairly confident with some local information that was a good example of seed condition and plenty of potential for improvement in that site. This is just a diagram of the actual design of the research on Monteagle. So basically comparing spelling with grazing. We also did some monitoring in a commercial spelling that was adjoining the trial as well. Within the spelling treatments, we had the early wet season, then the first 8 weeks of summer. So a rule of thumb was when we had 50 millimetres or more of rain over a 2-day period, we'd start the spelling and go for the next 8 weeks, which usually went from around November to the middle of February. The full wet season started on the same time and was usually for the 5 or 6 months of summer, with the spelling coming down in May or June. Within the early wet season spell, we looked at that on an annual as well as a biennial basis, so every year versus year 1, 3 and 5. And with the full wet season spelling, we also had that on an annual and a biennial basis, but also a series of the individual years to give us an indication of how seasonal conditions affected the outcomes of spelling. This line is called a drought index, and at each point every month is the previous 12 months rainfall divided by the long-term average rainfall. So anywhere above the 0 is above average for the previous 12 months. As you can see, where the trial ran, starting in late 2010, those first 2 years of the trial were in the order of 60 to 70% above long-term average rainfall. So we had 18 months of fairly wet conditions when the trial started at Monteagle, and then it went into severe drought for the next 3.5 years of the trial. That's a good. That line just shows what we were seeing in the paddock and what the owners were telling us was happening there. This is the pasture yield. As you can see, this is a pretty cluttered graph, and I apologise for that, but the main thing is that there's not a lot of difference between these lines. The main things to look at is the triangle line is the full wet season annual spelling, and this is the pasture yield under full wet season annual spelling. The flame in the middle there is where the whole trial was burnt out with a wildfire in November 2012. So the whole paddock had to be destocked then, and for that summer we didn't we weren't able to compare things. So the dark stars at the top of that graph is where there's statistically a significant difference in the treatments, and as you can see, the full wet season annual spelling is better than the grazed treatment. The cross line is the graze, and as you can see, the last 2 years of the trial is a trend where the full wet season annual spelling is well above the graze. So as you can see, it's not a major difference. There are some benefits of spelling, and there's certainly appears to be a trend emerging in the last 2 years of the trial. Again, this is the desert blue crown cover over the same time period, the 5 years of this trial. Crown cover being the area of living material of the perennial grass at ground level. So the bigger that is, the more healthy. As you can see, there's a big difference there between the triangle, the full wet season annual spelling, and the cross line, which is the continuously grazed. There were significant differences during those wet years of the trial, which is an encouraging result. Statistically, that hasn't continued through the rest of the trial, but again, there's that trend where those triangles consistently stay above the cross line. So again, it's an encouraging result. This is not something you'll be able to pick up and see with the naked eye in the paddock. But rest assured, those processes are benefiting when you're spelling in the paddock. And this was this graph here is the seedlings of the desert blue. So these seedlings, there was seedlings established in most recordings, except for that dry period in the end of 2012. These seedlings here established in February 2011. So these desert blue seedlings are established in a good wet season, and then they had sorry, my screen's just gone blank. They had another season of a good summer after that. Sorry, my screen keeps going blank. Those seedlings, they survived all the way through the trial, and if they were spelled, there was a trend there that they are increasing in size. So again, that's an encouraging result. It's a very small area. Again, you're not going to pick it up with the naked eye, but it's an encouraging result, and there was a statistical benefit there of spelling. It seems to be those seedlings established in a good year and had a good summer to follow that, and that enabled them to survive for the rest of the trial. Seedlings that established in later years didn't have those two good seasons, were killed off by the fire and dry conditions that followed. Just in summary, this graph here just shows some of the differences in life cycles that we witnessed and has been documented as well. The green bar, is the desert bluegrass, and the brown bar is the wiregrass. That first graph is the survival. So the desert blue is very tough and long-lived, and as you can see, nearly 90% of the plants that we recorded at the beginning of the trial are still surviving 5 years later. So that's very tough and long-lived, and that's how desert blue lives. As you can see, the wiregrasses are a lot shorter-lived. There's only around 20% of those original plants that have survived through that 5 years, and that's the way wiregrass operates. It's short-lived, but it produces more seedlings and keeps turning over and replacing itself. The next bar there is the seedlings that we measured on average per square metre per year. As you can see, the desert blue is in the order of less than 1, whereas the wiregrass is up around 3 and 4. So there's very few desert blue seedlings coming through. Despite those 2 years, 2 wet years, there's not a lot of desert bluegrass seedlings coming through. There's not a lot of them dying either. The next graph is the average deaths per square metre per year, and you can see a lot more from the wiregrass. The soil seed bank tells us why that happens, and we took samples every year, and Richard Silcock grew these out in pots in a greenhouse, and every seed that germinated, Richard identified and gave us a count of the viable seed in the soil. The green bar is the desert blue. it's averaged about 12 per square metre per year, compared to the wiregrasses, which is up around 90 per square metre per year. So the soil seed bank is limiting that the new seedlings coming through Desert Blue, and that's part of the reason why we didn't have a land condition improvement, because we don't have those new seedlings coming through to increase the crown cover and the composition of the pasture. So that explains a bit about how the wiregrasses hang in there even through drought years, and why the Desert Blue hasn't responded to spelling. But that's why Desert Blue is such a good grass, why it's a cornerstone of our beef production, because it is tough and long-lived and gets us through those fires and dry conditions. I might just stop there for a minute, Greg, and open it up to questions and answers. First, will I go straight on to, there's a question there about getting a copy of the webinar. I'm sure that's available.
Absolutely. I'll be sending out a follow-up email to the webinar session, and in that email will be the links to the recording for today's session, along with the PDF copy of the presentation you're presenting now, and that can be accessed through the Future Beef website. So we do have one question up there, Paul. What happened to the pasture in February 2012 under full wet season spelling? Very low yield compared to other treatments.
Yeah, that did happen. That's a bit of an outlier, that, and we don't have an explanation for what happened there. That not only happened in the total pasture yield, but in the yield of Desert Blue. We're not really sure. There was some dry conditions before then. It maybe didn't grow as expected. It didn't happen in the other 14 recordings, so I can't give a full answer to why that happened. We did have a number of operators all recorded the same thing, so it wasn't operator error. It's just an outlier is all I can say there.
Okay. Everyone, this is your opportunity to ask any question that you like of Paul in the presentation so far. If you think of any as we continue with today's session, please feel free to put them into the type them into the question box, and when we get towards the end, where I'm sure we'll be having, we'll have another Q&A session, and we can answer those questions that you put to Paul then. So Paul, if you want to continue with your presentation, that'd be terrific.
Okay, thanks, Greg. This is the Wombiana grazing trial, and this is our plots. As you can see, that's during some good seasons there. We set up 2 trials within the heavy stocking rate treatment of the Wombiana grazing trial. So it had 16 years of heavy stocking rate before we set up our spelling plots. And it had 2 trials within that paddock, one under the heavy stocking rate, and we also moved the fence so that we also had that sea condition land under a moderate stocking rate. So two separate trials there. It's the box land type up there. So this is the design diagram of the research, similar to the Monteagle, just a reduced number of treatments. One trial under a high stocking rate, and the other trial under the moderate stocking rate. The moderate stocking rate is long-term carrying capacity, and the high stocking rate is double that rate. So again, we had the full wet season and the early wet season treatment, and within each of those, the annual and the biannual basis. We have 3 years of data from the Wombiana research there. This is the pasture yield under the moderate stocking rate. Even though there's a trend for increasing yield under full wet season annual spelling, there was only a statistical difference in 1 year. Again, we had one good summer then, and it's gone into some pretty severe drought after then. Pardon me, and more of an impact of seasonal conditions than spelling treatments there. This is the pasture yield under the high stocking rate, exactly the same dates of recording. As you can see, some significant differences there under the full wet season spell, particularly at the end of summer compared to the grazed. The drought again has driven the pasture yields have come right down, but overall the moderate stocking rate had more pasture for the whole time compared to the high stocking rate. This is the desert blue crown cover under the moderate stocking rate with those spelling treatments. Again, not a strong effect. There's one area of a significant difference there early on in the trial. Again, a trend of improving crown cover comparing the spelling with the grazing. But as you can see from that graph, despite the drought conditions, the desert blue has maintained its crown cover. It's a very tough grass and very good to do that. And it's maintained its crown cover regardless of spelling. This is the same data for the high stocking rate. There's no benefit to spelling, and as you can see, the crown cover of the desert blue is really starting to suffer with the high stocking rate and the drought condition that's driving it down. I've just been up and the end of last year and done another recording, and it's coming down further still with the drought conditions up there. So an overriding impact of stocking rate. This is the same trend for seedlings, but again only under the moderate stocking rate. The seedlings of desert blue, which germinated in November 2012, there appears to be a trend of them increasing if in size and their survival if they've been spelled. Again, it's only a tiny size benefit, but it's an encouraging result and only happening under the moderate stocking rate. I'll just touch on Oaklands. This is a demonstration site. We piggybacked on some carbon work being done there by Stephen Bray, so there was a number of vegetation treatments which we were able to look at in relation to spelling. I won't go into the details of this, but it's very similar to our detailed studies, that there hasn't been a consistent improvement in crown cover or some of the other parameters with spelling. Some of them did benefit the overall to spelling. There's a small benefit of crown cover, but no sort of dramatic increase in land condition as a result of spelling. That's 4 years of data there from Oaklands as well. Just to recap on the key points coming in, spelling has given a small improvement in the crown cover of desert blue, which is an encouraging result, but it's only happening under that moderate stocking rate. So land condition and pasture composition hasn't improved with spelling so far, so it has not driven an improvement in productivity. There's a significant difference with pasture yields being increased at the end of the wet season with full wet season spelling. But overall, there's been very little effect of spelling under a moderate or high stocking rate. And land condition improvement is going to take many years, in the order of 10 plus years, I think, or around that 10 years. A seedling established for 3P grasses happens episodically, and you know, we're going to need that episodic event where there's a big establishment of 3Ps to help to drive land condition change, and it has not happened at either the Monteagle or the Bombiana site during those periods of research. Yeah, so it's going to take many years. It's going to be in the order of 10 years to have an impact on land condition and productivity with wet season spelling, and having the right stocking rate so that grading pressure is not too high over the summer season is going to be critical with that. I'll just go on to the modelling now. A GRASP is a pasture growth model. It's a series of mathematical equations that describe ecological processes, and one of those is how the soil infiltrates rainfall and makes that soil moisture available for plant growth. How the sunlight and daylight affects that plant growth. It also takes into account the competition from trees taking moisture out of the soil, the impact of ground cover and runoff, And now it's also got a cattle production component in it with utilisation of pasture and the impact of that on growth, particularly over that summer season. So grass is working pretty well, especially for long-term carrying capacity. But our project was able to add some data, some detailed data to help fine-tune those relationships over the summer and different grazing pressures and the impact on pasture growth. And some of the benefits from grass include extrapolating some of this information out to longer time frames and different time frames as well, so we can look at different seasonal conditions. This is Joe Scanlon's work, and it shows the power of this information and how we can look at things. The y-axis is called percentage perennial grass, which is another measure of land conditions. So the better that is, the higher that is, the better the land condition. The x-axis is a stocking rate, so increasing stocking rates as you go across the x-axis. And the lines are the end result of 30 different climatic windows of 10 years each. So grass was one, for example, from 1900 to 1930, and then 1905 to 1935, and that was done 10 times, and the results averaged out for these different stocking rates. It was run on a soil. It was similar to the box country at Wombiana, and a rain climate data file, so rainfall from that Wombiana area near Charters Towers. And this is the improvement in land condition. First thing you can see from this, that at very low stocking rates, there's no benefits to spelling. And very high stocking rates, there's no benefits to spelling. And we think what's happening there at very low stocking rates, the low utilisation is going to give good land condition. At very high stocking rates, the damage is occurring, which is going to negate those benefits to spelling. So the improvements are around those middle level stocking rates, and as you can see, it's only in the order of 10%, which may only be a half a land condition jump, or half to one land condition jump. The dashed line is summer spelling, the dotted line is a winter spell, and the black line is no spelling at all. So some really powerful information coming out of this type of modelling and looking at the benefits. So graphs can be used to answer some of these questions, the relationship of stocking rate with spelling. How does the seasons and the duration and frequency, the starting land conditions and growing conditions impact the outcomes? So we were able to, with Joe Scanlon, who's in the bottom photo, and Tim Moravec, do some case studies with a couple of our cooperating producers. That's Richard Hawkins on Bonaccord at Anarchy on the top right, and John Dunn at Oakland's Barralabar on the bottom right. So these guys were tremendous. So we're happy to share their information with us to work through some case studies, and they also had a think and came up with some questions that they would like answered. They both spell and they both adjust their stocking rates with seasonal conditions. Richard's block is mainly a cleared Brigalow block with a self-replacing herd, mainly selling EU and Japox steers and EU cows. And Richard is fairly aggressive in adjusting his stocking rates with seasonal conditions, and does a lot of spelling as well. But he's always questioned about how effective his spelling has been, whether he could run a few more head and make a few more dollars. John also does a lot of spelling and burning for woody weed control. But his block at Oaklands is some fairly infertile soils, and it's all breeders there, and the main benefit comes out of his creek flats with the box country. So his focus was on improving the land condition on those creek flats to give a improvement in body condition on his cows as a key thing addressing his profitability there. John doesn't like shifting cows and calves around the summer season, so he wants to look at a 2-paddock rotation, with one of them with the creek flats and the other one an adjoining bullock country, and spelling the creek flats 6 months every 18 months. Okay, so Joe did a number of simulations on one accord. Richard gave us his data there, and over the last 15 years, he's run on average 18.5 AE per 100 hectares. So the first simulation was looking at that as a fixed stocking rate. Joe looked at a very low stocking rate, a very conservative stocking rate, again with no spelling or varying for seasonal conditions. Another treatment which averaged out at the same overall stocking rate, but looking at varying stocking rate with seasonal conditions, and this was done based on the actual stock records that from Bonaccord. And the number 4 treatment was called baseline, which is pretty much exactly what Richard does on Bonaccord. It's a variable stocking rate on seasonal conditions, but spelling for a third of the time. So generally 6 months grazing followed by a 3 month spell, and that was very similar to what was happening on Bonaccord. And to answer Richard's question, that variable stocking rate was spelling, but a 5% increase in stocking rate. Here's some of the results from a land condition and the economic analysis. So you can see the ABCD land condition graph there. The fixed at the highest stocking rate had the lowest land condition at the end of the period. The fixed at the very low stocking rate had the highest land condition at the end of the period. The straight line is the baseline, which is the variable stocking rate plus spelling, and gave a very good land condition at the end there. The variable stocking plus spelling plus the increase of 5% in stocking rate also gave fairly good land condition at the end there. There wasn't a great difference in the economic analysis. This is a gross margin analysis. Overall, the baseline gave the best internal rate of return. The increased stocking rate of the variable plus spell plus 5% gave the best net present value because of the increased turnover of beef production per hectare with the increased stocking rate. So not a great difference in the overall economic analysis, but some big differences in land condition there with the different management. I'll just go through this quickly. I'm just aware of time. This is the Oaklands example, looking at 2 adjoining paddocks. Sorry, my screen's just gone blank again. And just comparing a safe stocking rate or long-term carrying capacity being run on those 2 paddocks versus a spelling scenario. So the spelling worked on a 6-month full wet season spell every 2nd year. So as you can see from the adult equivalents there, that those during that spelling period, that 160 head went into the timbered paddock for that 6-month period. The safe stocking rate gave a total of about 332 adult equivalents for those 2 paddocks. With the spelling scenarios, that was able to be increased to 350, so a small increase in long-term carrying capacity. I might add in that Joe had to run a number of simulations at different stocking rates to come up with this, which is the optimum stocking rates to get the best outcomes for what John was asking about, which was improving the land condition in those box flats. And this just shows the power of this model, and it is relevant to those specific scenarios, specifically those climate windows, but it does show the outcomes that can be achieved. Again, not a big difference in the economic analysis. The long-term carrying capacity scenario gave the best land condition outcomes, but the proviso to increase the box flats and maintain land condition in the timbered paddocks, that method of spelling was able to achieve that, and gave an outcome that how that could be achieved for what John was asked after. All right, I'll just conclude now with how this fits into overall grazing land management recommendations. Again, stocking around long-term carrying capacity, maintain land condition, and maximising long-term profitability. Stocking rate should be varied in a risk-averse manner, and that's particularly important with spelling and not loading up those paddocks that aren't being spelled. Wet season spelling is essential to maintain pasture condition and allowing some recovery of those overgrazed areas. Patch grazing can be partially managed through infrastructure and sometimes patch burning. And in terms of infrastructure development and multi-paddock, it's extremely context development and relevant to individual properties, but overall complex multi-paddock grazing systems don't appear to be justified. And that should give acceptable economic and environmental outcomes. In spelling, the importance of spelling during the growing season. Spelling during the winter period is pretty ineffective, but does have other benefits of sustaining ground cover and giving a bulk for other purposes, for burning or a spare paddock. Appropriate stocking rates are important, so that high grazing pressures are not going on during the wet season. And the poorer the initial land condition, more frequent rests are going to be needed. And the biggest improvements are going to be in those good growing years of good growing conditions. All right, I'll conclude there, and I see there's some questions coming in here. Do you want to chip in, Greg, or can I go ahead and have a look at that?
No. I'll help you out. I'll help you out there, Paul. Thanks for that. One of the questions that's coming in is that many areas are now covered in Indian couch at the expense of 3P grasses. Would you expect to find different results for spelling where Indian couch is dominant?
That's a good question. It's there is a bit of Indian couch within our Wombiana plots, and there was next to none at the Montego plots. With what we know about establishment of 3P grasses, and it doesn't happen very often, so it could take a lot longer, definitely, where there's a good density of 3P grasses, and where the Indian couch. Indian couch has the competitive advantage of having that stoloniferous habit, so it sends out runners sideways and it roots on the nodes and can quickly colonise areas. So that could provide competition and prevent 3P grasses establishing in those areas. So it's a bit of an unknown, but yeah, my gut feeling is it's not going to help things.
Okay, thanks for that. Ladies and gentlemen, this will be the final Q&A session for today. So if you do have a question, feel free, just type it in and we can ask it out. So another question, Paul, is it seems that recognition of the episodic events resulting in 3P seedling establishment is very important. Considering that management outside of that event shows marginal difference, what are the characteristics, i.e. climate conditions, associated with that episodic event so that management can be targeted at any time?
It'd be good to have that knowledge and give a comprehensive answer. We don't really know, and there's a number of things happening there. It's not the only thing that's preventing the land condition improvement. I mean, there's bare areas that need to cover up as well, and the crown cover of existing plants need to improve and change composition. We do have some information on that with David Orr's work at the Toorak grazing trial at Julia Creek, and he did record that episodic event in a huge establishment of Mitchell grass. And that happened after a couple of years of good seasonal conditions, and then there was a dry summer, and the following summer is when that episodic event happened. And it just appeared that the dry conditions primed the seed and resulted in a good establishment, and that good summer got it going again. That's a generalisation. It's an inference. We don't really know. Even though the average of the desert blue viable seed was quite variable across years, and surprisingly in the last 2 years at Monteagle, it got a bit higher, up around 20 viable seeds per square metre, despite there being drought. So it's not just the amount of rainfall. There's I suspect it's the amount of nitrogen, available nitrogen as well, and that can vary and not always doesn't always correlate with good seasonal conditions. Just as with our buffel grass, seeding of buffel grass is restricted by rundown and poor nitrogen. I think it's exactly the same with our perennial grasses. So we don't have a full answer for that. It's not the only thing that's going to hinder land condition improvement though, because particularly with both those sites, Monteagle and Mombiana, there was a reasonable composition of wiregrasses, up around 30 to 40%. So there's a physical barrier of and competition from the improvement in composition of desert blue there as well. So there's that side of it as well. There's the bare areas that need to be filled in. There's that physical composition of wiregrass and undesirable grass that needs to be replaced. We need new seedlings coming through, and we need an increase in the crown cover of the 3P grasses. And there's a heap of processes and things we don't understand around all those processes. So wish I haven't answered that question, but I've told you where we're up to anyway.
It does become difficult when you've got so many variables playing. I'm very conscious of time, but I'll give a few moments in case there are some very last-minute questions to come in. So I don't see any coming in, so we might just sort of start to wrap things up a bit. So I will just take over from you, Paul. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank Paul for sharing his ideas and his research today. You've supplied some really terrific information on how to use spelling strategies to improve that pasture condition. And I'd also like to say a big thank you to everyone for coming along today and interacting with us. It would be remiss of me not to, so don't forget to receive the daily emails from the Beef Central crew. If you haven't already signed up, then pop over to beefcentral.com and do so. You're also welcome to visit our Future Beef website, your one-stop shop for beef information across Northern Australia. In due course, this is where you will find the webinar recording, and as I have said earlier, I'll send you that link in my follow-up email to you. So yes, of course, we will be asking for your feedback from today's event, and we'll be using SurveyMonkey to help us with that. And I will also include that link in my follow-up email. So folks, that's all for today. Again, I'd like to thank Paul for giving us his time and insights. And again, a big thank you to you all for coming along and interacting with us. So until we connect again, it's all the best, and hooroo for now.